you log in yesterday. Close to 700 of you joined our digital room and participated in some very rich conversations that tackled some of the conceptual questions around radicalization online. We discussed China. We discussed some of the bigger questions around what's happening in different geographies. Today, we are joined by Mr. Ram Madhav to have a quick peek at something that India confronts on a daily basis, violent extremism and various shades of extremism that we as Indians and the Indian state has to respond to. Mr. Ram Madhav, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Today is also particularly important because we have the foundation stone laying ceremony at Ayodhya, the Ram Janmabhoomi. We also mark 1 year of India's decisions to make a political reorganization of its integration with Kashmir. And in some sense, 1 year ago and today marks the emergence of a different texture of the Indian state. There has been much written about. I am not going to delve into that. You have seen both the commentaries for and against both of these subjects, and I don't want to delve necessarily into the pros and cons of each one's arguments. But I want to ask you, as a keen political watcher, what is the nature of extremism that we confront today? And do you think Indian state's evolution in the recent past is beginning to respond to it, or maybe sometimes also in some sense create an ecosystem where we are seeing more polarization and divisions?
Firstly, neither Ayodhya nor Jammu and Kashmir, namely, especially the Article 370 legislation, neither of them should be seen from the prism of Hindu-Muslim. One was a constitution-related decision taken with respect to one particular state. The other was a historical conflict that has finally been addressed to India's highest court. So these things should not be interpreted as though they are the flashpoints between Hindus and Muslims. Although on both sides there will be forces which try to interpret and try to find fault lines between the two communities. Having said it, India's terrorism problem is, of course, as old as, right from the time we became independent, we have had this left-wing extremism. And in the last 25 years, we have seen the rise of the radical Islamist terror in parts of the country. So there are certain insurgent groups which used to be very active in the past in some of the northeastern states. But if you look at the scenario today, except for the state of Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, even within Jammu and Kashmir, except for the Kashmir Valley area, and some pockets in central India, rest of the country, at least in the last 5-6 years, has been largely terror-free. When I say largely terror-free, I am saying it based on the data available. For example, the last major terror incident in the heartland, except for Kashmir and northeast, the last incident was in 2013, the bomb blast in Bodh Gaya. Otherwise, we have been relatively free from terror in the last 5-6 years. I see two reasons for it. Number one, of course, state in the last 5-6 years has shown a different kind of sternness towards terror. To tackle terror, state has to be very stern. If state is seen compromising, state is seen buckling under the terrorist pressure, then terrorism will only grow. Number two, most importantly, India, unlike other countries, is a country which offers equal rights and equal opportunities to all its people. Whether it is a Muslim, or a Christian, or a Hindu, or a Buddhist, or a Sikh, everybody enjoys equal rights in this country, equal opportunities in this country. I would go one step further and say that, in India, there is positive discrimination in favor of the minorities here. That is why terrorism, if it is to take root out of any oppressive kind of political climate, that doesn't exist in India. Having said it, there will be ideological movements. There will be certain political movements that believe in terror. Such movements can still impact or influence certain sections of the society, but largely the experience of India in all these years has been that neither the religious terrorist movements nor the political movements could have greater influence over Indian youths. The reason I mentioned was largely because Indian youths find India's democracy to be sufficient to, battle out their challenges and grievances.
Sir, you have raised an issue about a stern state or a tough state in terms of response. How do you imagine, or how do you estimate the impact? What is your estimation of the impact of online radicalization on Indian security? We are also seeing today the internet being used to propagate certain kind of radical thoughts. You are seeing certain Indians from Kerala take part in certain movements outside the country. How worried should we be that this rich digital ecosystem that we are investing into is also creating polarization, division, radicalization, sometimes extremism and violence?
Absolutely, and it's a very important and very, very contemporary challenge for all the democracies in the world. You see, just like democracies have matured, progressed, terrorism also has progressed together with technology. In 1990s, if you recall the Gulf War of 1990s, the only source of information for us used to be the CNN. And look at what happened in 2000, in early 2000s when the Afghan and Iraq conflict happened. You had the visuals live, and from there today the terrorist organizations use the media, the social media, mainstream media, to propagate and gain legitimacy in a certain section of the society. They are today using not only digital but also virtual platforms. They are using cyberspace in a big way. It is going to be a major challenge for all the democracies and all those who are combating terror. We have to come up with ways of, number one, securing our cyber assets. Towards that, we need stricter laws, more stringent laws. Number two, we also have to compete in this narrative building. You see, I have handled Kashmir. The challenge that we used to face in Kashmir was not that all the Kashmiris are influenced by the radical Islamist propaganda, but the radical Islamist propaganda was much more spread across the state, much more easily available than the other propaganda, the propaganda of the country, of the government. It is here that the real challenge lies. Countries, democracies have to now step up their efforts to, number one, deny the opportunity for these forces to exploit the new technologies, especially the cyberspace. Number two, you have to come up with your own tools of propaganda, your own tools of countering the arguments and propaganda of the other side.
To ask you a couple of on this particular aspect, let me at this time invite our audience to post their questions if they have some for you. I'm going to take 2 or 3 only. It's a short conversation, but do post your questions. We'll take the 3 most interesting and controversial ones to post to Mr. Madhav. But let me ask you 2 questions, sir. When you are trying to counter propaganda, so the propaganda is that India is not a safe country, is unfair to Muslims, is unfair to minorities, doesn't give equal opportunities. That is the propaganda that the ISIS and other Islamic groups try to propagate to, say, attract certain constituencies. Similarly, the left-wing ideologues will suggest that this is a very oppressive, feudal regime and very caste-based, anti-people. So, there are different narratives that are built by different constituencies who are trying to attract people. Do you think the Indian state has developed the sophistication to build a counter narrative without actually pushing people into the arms of the ideologues?
It's a very sensitive situation that democracies face. On one hand, you have this deluge of onslaught happening, using all sorts of tools available, and in many cases, states are the sponsors of this propaganda. Then the challenge becomes much bigger, much more daunting for the democracies. So this at one level would sometimes force the democracies also to take to authoritarian measures in order to counter that. I may find it easy to rather block 4G in the Kashmir Valley completely rather than trying to succeed in countering the negative propaganda. But in the process, I'm actually denying the fundamental rights of the people also. This is the kind of a razor edge walk that governments have to make. So number one point that I make is governments should not be tempted by resorting to authoritarianism in order to counter another kind of authoritarian terrorism. Number one, that all of us have to be very careful about it. But having said it, number two, it is a very important dimension to which the entire administration's attention has to turn to. I have no hesitation in saying that even in a country like India, while the challenge is so big, are we fully equipped to take on this cyber challenge? Cyber security, do we have enough laws in place? Do we have enough sensitization in the government machinery? I still think that we have a long way to go. Governments have to equip themselves in a big way to tackle this challenge.
Sir, I think that's a fair point, that we need to build capacity so that we don't have to resort to internet shutdowns. That's a fair. I'll ask you another important question for democracies like India. We get elected because we make certain promises, we build certain cadres, we build certain digital armies. Sometimes those armies capture the narrative. Do you sometimes think that the digital armies that become your cadres during mobilizations required for electioneering and democratic processes are also need to be communicated to, so as to ensure we don't create a divisive ecosystem in the digital space? Do you think we are always at war with each other on social media? I mean, I sit and watch social media. It seems that China is in the is on our border, is threatening us, but Indians are having a go at each other. Do you sometimes feel that the electioneering is never ending? It is permanent polarization, permanent bickering, permanent antagonism.
No, social media by its very nature is utterly democratic. So here lies a challenge also, but an opportunity also. Since it is completely in the hands of the individuals, they have freedom to articulate their views. In that sense, it is good from the point of view of any healthy democracy. But as you rightly pointed out, there can be this whole danger of, certain real armies, certain, today bots, you can create bots, the bots will fight on your behalf. So this technological challenge is also there in it. You see, what today is happening is because of this kind of it is putting pressure on the political parties also in a way. We have been forced to become more accountable today. You cannot get away with the kind of things you do and then you think that nobody will challenge me. It is no longer possible. So the kind of spread that we have is helping politics become more accountable, more transparent. But yes, in the process, sometimes those unhealthy elements, unwholesome elements also sometimes get an opportunity to spread hatred, spread bad thoughts. That is where responsible groups, responsible organizations have to be careful. And of course, today even the companies themselves are taking measures to ensure that you cannot cross a particular line.
My question is, are political parties doing enough? Are you talking to your cadres to sensitize them in certain forms of communication? I think that is important. And I'm not talking about BJP alone.
Absolutely. As far as we are concerned, we make. I think we always make sure that the public discourse, especially on the social media, from our side, from the side of party functionaries and all, it never crosses that red line.
That is questionable, but I think all parties need to do more. I mean, you will agree with me that we have crossed a few red lines in the past, but I think the sensitization.
Yeah, see, that is the reason for it is that this medium is so very democratic that you just cannot control each and every voice that is there on the social media. I can tell you, we ourselves get a lot of brickbats from our own supporters.
Correct.
If they are unhappy with
I witness the discourse every morning, and I feel that why did I wake up? But let me ask you a question we have received from the audience now. We have very interesting questions. We have a question from Ratnadeep Chakravarti. The question is that we have given legitimacy to certain narratives by incidents like Delhi riots. When an image of the riot ended in a magazine cover of ISIS, she's talking about the magazine that ISIS launched. How do we respond to this development when certain local incidents or domestic incidents become the basis of capture of the mind space by outsiders or by external bad actors?
The terrorist groups are their cohorts in various countries. If they try to pick up something in India and try to use it for their propaganda, then please don't blame India or Indian system for that. If it is picked up by a legitimate organization outside and they are questioning you, yes, you have to respond to it. You are answerable to that. But a terrorist group will always try to look for certain kind of a narrative to build on. It's not necessary that that narrative should be true. That is factual. Mostly these narratives are all false. You mentioned about certain narratives about India, whether it is a fascist regime or it is an oppressive regime, it's all propaganda. India is one country which has seen governments changing at the drop of a hat. We seem very powerful under Prime Minister Modi today, but we have lost 6 states in the last 1.5 years. Nobody in this democracy is invincible. That is the inherent power of our democracy. So this propaganda, they will do that. So we can't be held accountable for what ISIS is publishing on its cover page. We should simply dismiss it.
So on a related question, I think something that you had mentioned earlier, the question here is that productive. They're keeping the Kashmiri youth away from 4G services in fear of propaganda. Will we actually serve the purpose, or perhaps be the reason of will it be the reason of radicalizing more and more youth?
No, firstly, not the fear of propaganda. It's a reality.
It's a general.
The services, the internet services are used to spread some kind of a hatred, some kind of a motivate youths towards terror and all that is a reality in Kashmir. So we need to find ways of tackling it. Today, yes, we found one way to prevent it is to only allow 2G services, not the 4G services. But eventually at some point we have to again restore 4G. Then this challenge remains. So Indian state has to enhance its capability of tackling these kind of challenges. How do we tackle it is the question before the administration. The day we arrive at a good answer, the 4G will be available to everybody.
So there is a question from Netra Palepu, if I get the name right, and that is that you have spoken. In fact, she asks a broader question. We spoke about left-wing extremism. How genuine is your concern about right-wing extremism? And what is the government doing to manage both? In Europe, now they have a whole section and whole debate and whole study around because of their own past. So what is the government? Is the government cognizant of this? Is government doing something about it? Both left-wing extremism and right-wing extremism.
Firstly, this whole talk about right-wing terrorism, extremism, etc. is largely an academic creation. When I'm saying this, I'm saying it with responsibility because there is data available to talk about it. Not Indians. The Americans, the State Department, their agencies have done an extensive study of the terrorism, the elements of terrorism in India. You have the data which shows that in the last 15 years, I think, 20 years, 1995 to 2015, in the last 20 years, India has had 12,000 plus terror incidents that can be attributed to left-wing terrorism. 10,000 plus terror incidents that can be attributed to radical Islamist terror, around 50 incidents are what they have categorized as right-wing terror. About 50. It is non-existent. Even among these 50, most of them will be locally one caste and one minority community will be clashing. That will be portrayed as right-wing terror. Or there will be certain forces which will be indulging in anti-particular religion activity. There will be one or two instances. So it's not a pan-Indian phenomena. It's not as big as it is portrayed out to be. It is in fact, there is no such thing called Hindu terror in this country. There is something, sometimes a clash at the local level. Sometimes some people, out of their animosity for a particular religion, maybe Islam or some other religion, indulge in certain things which have to be condemned, they have to be punished, they are being punished. I mean, in all these cases, about 50 odd incidents which are supposed to be right-wing extremist incidents, everybody is punished today. They are all in jails.
Sir, there are two questions which are kind of related to this. So I'll just, sorry to interrupt you. There is Radhika and there is Shashank Ranjan, who both ask a similar question. They say that, and they basically talk about the very special day we are today, which is the day when we are doing the foundation stone laying ceremony for the Ayodhya temple, the Ram Mandir. They say that does the day today symbolize the triumph of majoritarianism? And you had already answered when you spoke about the court process. So, but this is the question. And does it challenge the social fabric of the country? Do minorities lose faith in the country? And I think Radhika had a very similar question, that what is the relationship between this particular day and the fact that 1 year ago you reorganized Kashmir, but also began the process of lockdowns and shutdowns in that state. So this is there are two people who are asking very similar questions, and I think you're the best person to respond to this query.
Yeah, number one, there is no triumphalism. Number two, there is no majoritarianism in it. This is, I mean, I'm firstly talking about the foundation laying ceremony for the Ram temple today. This is the culmination of a long drawn process of legal scrutiny. After the process was completed, the Supreme Court of India, 5-judge bench, of the 5 judges, there was one of the judges was a Muslim also, unanimously gave the verdict in favor of that land being used to build a temple again. So when the temple is coming up there, it should be seen as a symbol of our collective efforts of the 1.3 billion Indians. There will be certain elements in all the religions which will still try to make it into a communal kind of a conflict. But look at the response of the larger country in the last 7 months ever since the judgment came. There was no triumphalism, there was no chest stamping on the part of the Hindus, and most importantly, there was no shouting from the rooftops about injustice, no kind of communal propaganda, no kind of street reaction from the Muslim community either. Everybody took it in a very sober and positive sense. Today, as per the Supreme Court directive, a 5-acre land has been allocated to the Muslims to build another mosque just away from Ayodhya, and a committee for construction of that mosque also has been formed. Once the Ram temple work begins, the 1.3 billion Indians should come together, extend their good wishes for the coming up of that mosque also. That is about the first part. It's no majoritarianism, no triumphalism, but it is a victory for the value system which Bhagavan Ram represented. We should see it from that perspective only. But coming to this date of August 5th, only significance is that they found a good muhurta on this day. The people involved in building the temple. Now, those who link it to Kashmir must remember certain facts. On 5th August 2019, the bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha. It was passed in Lok Sabha on that day, but it went before the Rajya Sabha on the 7th of August. So it's not just 5th which is important, 7th is also important. And I tell you something more. Only it was the passing of the bill that had happened on these days. The actual act was promulgated on 31st October 2019. So where is the connection between Kashmir and now? But okay, I mean these dates are close to each other, but there is no significance beyond that.
Sir, great. We have to conclude in the next few minutes. So I want to ask you an important question, which luckily Brigadier B.K. Khanna has also posed. And I want to put this in the larger context of fighting ideologies online which are trying to divide the nation, create extremism, create violence, create. He says all political parties have dirty tricks departments which are used to attack the opposite parties. He says this is deplorable and shows India in bad light. I will add, this also is our weakness. The Chinese, the Pakistanis, our enemies can all use these internal propaganda narrative wars to ride on them and weaponize our public sphere. For me, in the sanctity of India's public sphere, our openness, our diversity, our argumentative nature, our loud and sometimes even contrarian conversations. Are you worried that because we have unleashed these digital trolls, I think the word is trolls, the troll armies, should we be worried about it as a country?
No, firstly, in our party, we don't have any dirty tricks departments and all. I don't know about other parties. As I said earlier also, we do not allow our people, at least our cadres, to cross that line of decency in public discourse. What we call as trolls are sometimes, to us, everybody, you face it, I face it. We all face it in public life. No person in public life is above criticism. We are all subjected to a daily scrutiny on the social media. I have no issue with that. Where we have issues is when they cross the line. Though their responses have the potential to damage the social harmony, communal goodwill, then yes, we all have to stand up and say this is not acceptable. As far as we are concerned, we are very clear that this far, no further. On that we are very clear. You have seen in the entire Ram Janmabhoomi issue also, none of our leaders has uttered a single word that can be construed as anything to damage the intercommunal relations in the country. We have to have that self-regulation mechanism, self-veto. Lost connection.
I missed the last part of your answer because I had a bad connection. That's the life we live in. But sir, if you can repeat the last part for me so that I can conclude this session. Can we, in fact, let me extend it a little further and ask you one more question. Do you think it is time that political parties across party lines in India, in democratic countries, take this phenomena seriously, that how insurgent ideologies can challenge democracy? And do you think parties such as yours and you personally should come up with a framework, a normative framework where we should all pledge to keep the digital conversations positive, build communities, and build amity amongst people? Do you think it's time to now counter the hate and the negativity by promoting and projecting positive stories of friendship, peace, and cohabitation?
Of course, it is the responsibility of the every citizen, especially it is the responsibility of the leaders in public life, whether it is intellectual leaders or the media leaders or the political leaders. I would probably draw one line though. In public life, normal criticism, normal trolling is a part of the public life. When we see this kind of acrimonious debate, we sometimes think in a very stereotypical manner. Like if a Hindu and a Muslim are arguing with each other in a manner that you don't like. Suppose they are arguing, we assume that that it has the potential for the Muslim to become a terrorist. No, it's not so. It is not the social discourse that makes terrorists out of it. Terrorists are made out of certain political, religious ideologies or certain very extensively oppressive atmosphere. But our problem is, if there is a serious social discourse, serious discourse, we assume that if Muslims are oppressed, it will lead to terrorism. And subconsciously we think that every Muslim is a potential terrorist. It's not so.
I get your point, and I also get your point that social media is not the whole world. We believe just because we are having social media exchanges. But my fear is that as increasingly people live on social media, will it start affecting their real personalities as well? That's my problem, because with work from home, all of us are always on social media. We don't meet people in real life anymore. We are only meeting digitally. Is our understanding of the other community, other people becoming restricted to social media exposure?
No, not really. That's precisely what I'm saying. Whatever negative propaganda that you encounter on the social media, if you are a wise person, you are a sensible person, you know how to separate the negative propaganda and what to take good from it. But my larger point is the question that you are asking: how do we tackle the challenge of radical terrorist elements trying to occupy this space, exploit this technology to spread their influence or their domination? That's a big challenge, in which, especially on the cyber security question, countries have to come together. We all have to work together. We all have to come up with certain mechanisms to kill this cyber challenge. It's going to be a very big challenge for the future.
Thank you so much, sir. I think there is a degree of optimism in your comments this morning. You believe that the idea of India is bigger than the social media debates that we hear, that the fabric and the strength of the Indian fabric is stronger than just what a few trolls can dismantle. But you have also rightly pointed out that we need to be more conscious and sensitive to the narratives we build. The Indian state has to also increase its capacity, enhance its capacity to respond to the propaganda. And of course, while the internet shutdown may be one of the tools to respond to the hijacking of the digital space, we will have to look for more specific and surgical solutions in the future. So with this optimistic view that we as a state can respond to insurgent ideologies, let me thank Mr. Ram Madhav ji for coming, speaking about all the issues that were posed to him very frankly and transparently. And sir, we look forward to having with you with us soon again. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back with the Kashmir panel. Stay tuned on this interface for much more today on Tackling Insurgent Ideologies 2020. And my colleague Maya will be back with you in a while. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.